All right, what is failure? Failure can look different to all of us. And I want to talk about why failure is so important and how to really approach failure so that it doesn't just completely wreck us. That's right. So strap in, get ready for episode 214. Let's go.
The future of fitness.
How do you gain muscle mass?
Fitness is not complicated. It's simple when you break it down.
There's so much information out there.
No fads, no diets, just plain simple habits.
You're listening to the Bones to Bulk podcast.
Hey, welcome to today's episode. My name is Brian Parody, and I will be your host today. And if this is your first time tuning in, I'm glad that you've just chosen to take a few minutes out of your day to listen to this. I try to really simplify fitness. I used to be a completely skinny guy. I couldn't gain weight. People told me, oh, just eat whatever you want. Yeah, it didn't work. But I finally, thank goodness, figured out the secret. And it's really not a secret. It's just consistency. It's lifting regularly. It's eating the right kinds of food in the right amount. And I try to just really simplify it because I feel like fitness is so overcomplicated. For those of you tuning back in, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it. And if you've not taken part in one of our online communities, please go follow me, whether it's Instagram, TikTok. We have a great group on Facebook. I would just love to connect with you some more. Or a text community. You can text podcast to 706-222-7551 and become a part of that. I send out a few texts a week. You can ask me questions at that number. It's just a great way for me to stay connected to you. All right, with that being said, let's dive in. So we all kind of know that failure is an important thing when it comes to weightlifting, right? We want to bring those muscles to failure because that's when growth happens. That's when true change begins to happen. And we really need to approach life the same way. You probably can look back at past failures. Maybe it was with a job, maybe it was with a relationship, maybe it was with a personal fitness goal or some other goal, and you set out to do it, good intentions, and you failed. And usually one of two things happened with that failure. Either A, we learned our lesson and what not to do, and it made us better, or two, we were stubborn and we had to fail again before we learned our lesson. And I've got my hand up because I've definitely had those things where it's taken me multiple times to realize, like, hey, this isn't working. You may need to change things up a bit. But we've got to approach failure from a positive perspective. And I know it's hard, when we're in the middle of that failure, I get that it's kind of overwhelming. We just failed. We are hard on ourselves, I think, more than anybody else. Like, we are so critical of ourselves. And I know for me, like, if I fail at something, I immediately go into this, I just suck. I think a lot of us kind of turn inwards. And that's okay to do. It's just not okay to stay there. Because we've got to, once we've had our little pity party for a day or so, depending on the extent of the failure, then we've got to, come face to face with, like, okay, you know what? I screwed up. I failed. Well, whatever. Life happened. I've got to move on now. I've got to pick myself up and I've got to do now what needs to be done. And when we approach it from that, failure really becomes a stepping stone. It shifts from, man, I really messed up, to, okay, this wasn't the best decision, but how can I learn from it? How can I grow from it? How can I use it to my advantage to become a better person in the future? And this doesn't just apply to fitness. This applies to everything in life. I don't know what your upbringing was, what your childhood was like, but sometimes, depending on our upbringing, failure was devastating as a child. If we didn't have that support system in place to encourage us to keep going, or if we had, negative parental figures in our lives or lack of parental figures in our lives that taught us that failure was okay, then it can be really hard to learn that later in life. But it can be learned later in life. It can be. The old saying, you can't teach a new dog new tricks. Yeah, you can. You can adapt. You can learn new things. You can just really take hold of your life and change. And we all know that, right? I mean, it sounds great. It sounds awesome just to be like, oh yeah, I can change. I can do, but when it comes to real world, how many times have you started something and maybe it didn't turn successful? Well, it wasn't necessarily because you're failing. It's because you're learning how to do something properly. When we're learning to walk as toddlers, how many times do we fall? Like a crap ton, right? I know with my kids, they fell all the time when they were learning to walk. And it was easier for them just to crawl. And so it took a long time for them to get to that point where they didn't want to just crawl, they wanted to walk. And I feel like we don't allow ourselves that same grace as adults. We think we have to get it perfect on the first try, and nobody gets it perfect on the first try. And I don't care, what celebrity, what famous person, what person out there that we look up to, like nobody has had it easy. Okay, I'm not going to say nobody because there probably is, a small percentage that's had some things handed to them. But my point is, for the majority, there's no overnight success stories. There's no just one shot, one win type thing. What we don't see is all the behind the scenes. We don't see all the failures. We don't see all the mistakes. We don't see all the shit that goes on in people's lives for them to get to the point they're at. I love, maybe you don't know this about Dwayne Johnson, maybe you do. First off, I have a huge man crush on Dwayne Johnson. I'm going to meet him someday and we're going to be best friends. He just doesn't know it yet. But, his dream was to be a football player. He wanted to be a football player. He didn't make the NFL. He made a Canadian amateur team, and he ended up getting cut from that team because he wasn't good enough. And so here he is in Canada, and he has the story is he has $7 in his pocket, and he doesn't know what the hell he's going to do. And, that's a hard place to be when we've just dreamt our whole lives of doing something and we realize we're just not good enough. Because there are some things, I truly believe that you can do anything you want in life if you work hard enough towards it. But I also think there are certain fields where if there's just no talent there, then it's going to be a lot harder for us to get our foot in the door. You know what I'm saying? I suck at drawing. Now, if I wanted to be a professional artist, I probably could get there. It would take me a hell of a long time because I suck at it. So there's people who are naturally gifted, artists who are just incredible at what they do. They're going to have a huge advantage over me. That doesn't mean I can't do it, but it means that road's going to be a lot harder for me. So we have to understand, there are things that maybe aren't our, lane, but we can still make progress in them. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm confusing you. My point is, there are things we are going to fail at, literally. And we've got to accept it as, okay, this taught me that maybe this isn't the right route for me to take. And maybe I just need to adjust course a little bit and I'll get to where I want to go. I didn't always think I wanted to run a fitness business. I used to think I wanted to be a firefighter. That was my dream. I was going to live in a firehouse and fight fires, and that was going to be it. And I went through paramedic school because at the time I lived in Texas, and be a firefighter, it was a huge advantage to be a paramedic. So I became a paramedic. Fast forward a couple years, I met my wife, I moved out of state. Things just changed, and I didn't really want that lifestyle anymore. And it was this thing that I'd worked so hard towards so many years. And then, I realized hey, I don't know if this is what I want. And so often we think that changing our fitness levels, our bodies, our whatever is this quick, okay, I just got to put in the work and things will automatically change. No, it won't. You're going to have to make adjustments. The longer I do fitness, the more I realize that I still have so much to learn, so much. And there's so many people that I feel are so far beyond me, and there's so much that I can learn from those people. And I've got to constantly be positioning myself to be okay, what can I learn? How can I improve? How can I become better? Because there's always more you can do. But you've got to ask yourself, what can I do right now? Because if I took myself 8 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do the stuff that I do today then. I wasn't ready for that level. And sometimes we get that end goal in mind and think, I'm just not, to that end goal. I don't have the ripped body. But you know what? We're not at that stage yet. We're not at that level. Where are we today? What can we accomplish? What can we learn from our failures? What do we know we can accomplish right now, here, today? Not a year from now, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. It's how life works. We don't just get to this place overnight and then just coast through life forever. I wish it was that simple, but life is hard. It's amazing and great and wonderful, and I have so much hope for the future and all that, but life, to quote Rocky, will beat you and keep you down permanently if you let it. I love that scene from Rocky, by the way. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know. It will. And so we've got to recognize that, I'm going to fall. I'm going to get the living shit kicked out of me by life sometimes. But how am I going to respond to that? That is what truly matters. So I hope this is helpful. I don't know, again, what's going on in your personal life, what struggles you're facing, but believe me, I understand struggles. I've gone through many of them, and I know I still will have to go through a lot of them in life. And even though I wish I didn't, I know that I've learned so much from them in the past. And I still have a lot to learn, trust me. But I hope this encourages you. And just remember, whatever you're facing, whatever you're coming up against, whatever's currently kicking you in the teeth, you can overcome it. You can get past it. You can learn from it and look back and be like, man, I crushed this. All right, you've got this.